Some inheritances come with more than we bargained for, carrying the weight of unfinished stories and forgotten dreams. When life hands us the keys to someone else's past, we never know what doors we'll have to open. Eli Stoltzfus thought he was just cleaning out his uncle's old farmhouse before selling it. The 62-year-old Amish man expected broken windows and rotting floorboards. He didn't expect to find a little girl hiding in the attic. 8 years old, scared and silent, she clutched a torn quilt like it was her only friend in the world. The house had been empty for years, yet here she was. No family had reported her missing. No neighbors knew where she came from. How long had she been living up there alone? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The brass keys felt heavier in Eli Stoltzfus's weathered hands than they should have. 3 keys on a simple ring, one for the front door, one for the back, and one whose purpose he couldn't fathom. Uncle Samuel had always been a man of mysteries. Even in death, Eli stood on the sagging front porch of the farmhouse, watching dust motes dance in the late afternoon sunlight that slanted through broken shutters. The October air carried the scent of dying leaves and something else neglect, perhaps, or simply the weight of time passing without witness. He'd driven the 47 miles from his small apartment above the carpentry shop in Lancaster, telling himself this was just another job. Clean out the house, assess what could be salvaged, put the property on the market. Simple, practical, the way he'd learned to approach most things since leaving his Amish community 32 years ago. But nothing about this place felt simple. The farmhouse sat at the very edge of what the Amish called the English world, that vast, complicated space beyond their community's borders. Samuel had chosen this location deliberately when he'd left the church himself nearly 50 years ago. Close enough to remember, far enough to forget. Or so he'd claimed in the few letters they'd exchanged over the decades. Eli inserted the first key into the lock, surprised when it turned smoothly. Samuel had maintained something here, even if it wasn't the exterior. The door swung open with a groan that seemed to echo through empty rooms, and Eli stepped into a house that time had claimed, but not conquered. Dust covered everything like a gray shroud. But beneath it, he could see the bones of a well-built home. Wide plank floors that, despite their coating of grime, showed no signs of rot. Hand-hewn beams across the ceiling that his carpenter's eye recognized as premium chestnut wood that would outlast the men who'd cut it. Samuel might have left the Amish church, but he'd never abandoned their commitment to craftsmanship. The front room opened into a kitchen that told stories of meals shared and quiet evenings. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, its surface dulled but intact. Shelves lined with empty mason jars caught the filtered light from windows so dirty they barely deserved the name. On the kitchen table sat a small leather journal, its pages warped from moisture and time. Eli approached it cautiously, the way one might approach a sleeping animal. When he opened it, childish drawings spilled across the pages, stick figures holding hands. A house with smoke curling from its chimney. A man with a long beard feeding chickens. The drawings were recent, the pencil marks still dark against the yellowed paper. His breath caught in his throat. Someone had been living here. The floorboards creaked overhead, a sound that might have been settling wood, but felt like footsteps. Eli's pulse quickened as he looked toward the narrow staircase that led to the second floor. The sound came again, soft, deliberate, careful. "Hello?" His voice sounded strange in the empty house, rougher than he remembered. Years of working alone in his shop had made conversation a rare commodity. "Is someone there?" Silence answered him, but it was the kind of silence that holds its breath. Eli climbed the stairs slowly, testing each step before putting his full weight on it. The second floor held 3 small bedrooms and a bathroom that hadn't seen use in years. Dust lay undisturbed on every surface, except, he noticed with growing certainty, the floor. A path had been worn through the dust, leading from the largest bedroom to a narrow door at the end of the hallway. The attic. The door stood slightly ajar, and beyond it, wooden steps disappeared into darkness. Eli fumbled for a light switch, found none, and climbed toward whatever waited above. The attic stretched the length of the house, its peaked roof creating deep shadows on either side. Boxes and old furniture huddled in the gloom like sleeping giants. But in the far corner, beneath a single small window, something moved. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, curled beneath a quilt that had seen better decades. Her hair, dark and tangled, fell across a face pale with fear and hunger. When she saw him, she pressed herself deeper into the corner, clutching the quilt with fingers that trembled like autumn leaves. "It's all right," Eli said, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes, large and dark and filled with the kind of wariness that children shouldn't know, never left his face. She said nothing, but he could see her breathing, quick and shallow, like a cornered rabbit. Eli crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Are you hungry?" Still no response, but he saw her swallow hard. "My name is Eli. This was my uncle's house. Uncle Samuel. Did you know him?" At the mention of Samuel's name, something shifted in the girl's expression. Not exactly recognition, but a lessening of the stark terror in her eyes. "He was a good man," Eli continued. "He would have wanted you to be safe." The girl's grip on the quilt loosened slightly, and for the first time, Eli noticed what she was holding. Not just any quilt, this was Amish work. He recognized the pattern, the precise stitching, the way the colors played against each other in geometric harmony. His own mother had made quilts like this, back when he still called her ma'am and believed the world was no bigger than their farm in Lancaster County. "Where did you get that quilt?" The girl's eyes widened, and she pulled it closer again. But she didn't run. That was something. Eli settled himself on the floor, his aging joints protesting the position. "It's beautiful work. Someone who loved you made that, I'd wager." The words hung in the air between them, and he watched the girl process them. Loved, past tense. The way her shoulders sagged told him everything he needed to know about whoever had made that quilt. "Are you alone here?" A single nod, so slight. He might have imagined it. "How long?" She held up fingers. 7. 7 days? 7 weeks? He couldn't tell, but either answer made his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt since his own daughter, Rebecca, was small. The fierce, protective instinct that could make a man do foolish things. His daughter, Rebecca, would be 31 now, living her own life in Philadelphia with a husband Eli had met exactly twice and grandchildren, whose names he had to check his wallet to remember. The space between them had grown so gradually that neither had noticed until it became unbridgeable. Or so he told himself. "I need to go get some things from my truck," he told the girl. "Food, water. Will you be here when I come back?" Another nod. This one more certain. Eli pushed himself to his feet, every movement deliberate and calm. "I'll be right back. I promise." He descended the stairs with his mind spinning. A child, alone in his uncle's house. How had she gotten here? Where were her people? And what was he supposed to do about it? His truck sat where he'd left it, loaded with cleaning supplies and the few tools he thought he might need. Now he found himself digging through the emergency kit he kept behind the seat energy bars. Bottled water, a first aid kit that had been there so long he couldn't remember buying it. The autumn sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the overgrown fields in shades of gold and amber. Once this land had been productive. Samuel had grown corn here, raised a few head of cattle, lived the simple life that the church preached but somehow made complicated with its rules and expectations. When Eli returned to the attic, the girl was exactly where he'd left her, She accepted the water bottle with hands that shook slightly, drank deeply, and set it aside without a word. The energy bar took longer. She examined it from every angle before taking a tentative bite. "Good?" he asked. A slight nod. Eli settled himself against the opposite wall, far enough away that she wouldn't feel crowded, close enough that his presence might provide some comfort. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that comes when two souls recognize something familiar in each other. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in a sky that held the promise of winter. Eli found himself thinking about the choices that had brought him here, 32 years of them, starting with the day he'd walked away from everything he'd ever known. He'd been 19 then, full of questions the church couldn't answer and dreams it couldn't contain. His father had stood on the porch of their farmhouse, shoulders rigid with disappointment, and told him not to come back until he was ready to submit to God's will. Eli had driven away in a battered pickup truck, certain he was trading constraint for freedom. Now, sitting in his uncle's dusty attic with a frightened child, he wondered if he'd been wrong about what freedom meant. The girl had fallen asleep, her breathing deep, and even for the first time since he'd found her. The quilt rose and fell with each breath, and Eli found himself studying the pattern more closely. Wedding ring, he thought. A design meant to celebrate love and commitment, stitched with prayers for happiness and long life. Tomorrow he would have decisions to make, authorities to contact, questions to ask, complications to navigate. But tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be, keeping watch over someone who needed watching over. It wasn't the inheritance he'd expected, but perhaps it was the one he deserved. Dawn came gray and hesitant through the attic window, and, with it, the weight of reality. Eli had spent the night in an old rocking chair he'd dragged up from one of the bedrooms, dozing fitfully while keeping one ear tuned to the girl's breathing. She slept deeply, the kind of exhausted sleep that spoke of too many nights without rest. When she finally stirred, Eli pretended to be examining one of the dusty boxes near the window. He'd learned enough about frightened creatures, both animal and human, to know that too much attention could send them fleeing. "Good morning," he said quietly, not looking directly at her. "Sleep well?" A rustle of fabric told him she was sitting up, but she said nothing. When he glanced over, she was watching him with those dark eyes, alert but still guarded. "I brought more food." He pulled another energy bar from his jacket pocket, set it on the floor between them. "And I was thinking maybe today we could go downstairs. The kitchen might be more comfortable." The girl's eyes widened with something that might have been panic. "Just to eat," Eli added quickly. "You don't have to stay down there if you don't want to, but it's warmer and there's a proper table." She considered this for a long moment before getting the slightest nod. The descent to the kitchen felt like a negotiation. The girl stayed 3 steps behind him, ready to bolt back to her hiding place at the first sign of danger. But once they reached the kitchen, something in her posture relaxed. She went to the window and peered through the grime at the overgrown garden beyond. Eli opened the energy bar and pushed it across the table to her, along with another bottle of water. While she ate, he found himself really looking at her for the first time. Her clothes, jeans, and a faded pink sweater were clean but worn, the kind of garments that had been washed too many times and worn by too many children. Her hair needed brushing, and her face had the pale, pinched look of someone who'd been living on too little food for too long. But it was her hands that caught his attention. Small hands, but careful ones. She broke the energy bar into precise pieces before eating it, saving the wrapper by folding it neatly. These were the habits of someone who'd learned to make things last, to waste nothing. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Can't tell me, or don't remember." Another head shake, more definite. This time, "Can't tell." Eli nodded, accepting this. Trust, he knew, was earned in small increments. "Well, until you're ready to tell me, what should I call you?" The girl pointed to herself, then to him, a question in her gesture. "I'm Eli," he said. "And you are?" She held up her hand, fingers spread, then pointed to the window where 5 birds sat on the fence post. "5? You want me to call you 5? A shake of the head. Then she pointed more specifically. "The smallest bird, the one at the end. The little one? Little bird?" This earned him something that might have been a smile. "All right then, little bird. It is." They spent the morning in careful exploration of each other's boundaries. Little bird stayed close to the kitchen doorway, always keeping her escape route clear. But she watched everything Eli did with intense focus, as if cataloging information for future use. When he found cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink and began washing the windows, she fetched a rag without being asked and started wiping down surfaces. They worked in comfortable silence. 2 people who understood the value of simple tasks done well done. It was while she was cleaning the kitchen table that it happened. She was working carefully around the edges, following the wood grain with the kind of attention to detail that would have made his old woodworking teacher nod with approval. The quilt she kept wrapped around her shoulders caught on the table's corner, and as she pulled it free, something fluttered to the floor. A photograph, or rather, half of one. The paper was creased and faded, torn along one edge as if someone had ripped it apart in haste or anger. Little bird froze when she saw it, her face going pale. Eli bent to pick it up, moving slowly. The photograph showed part of a family, a woman's arm around a child's shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. But the right side was missing, torn away, leaving only empty space where someone else should have been. The child in the photograph was younger than little bird was now, maybe 5 or 6, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark hair, same serious eyes that seemed older than they should be. "This is you," Eli said softly. It wasn't a question. Little bird's breathing quickened, but she nodded. "And this lady, is she your mother?" The girl's face crumpled, and suddenly she was crying, not the dramatic tears of childhood, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of someone who had learned that loud grief brought unwanted attention. Eli set the photograph on the table and knelt beside her chair. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." But she was reaching for the photograph now, her fingers tracing the torn edge where someone else had been. "Someone's missing from the picture?" A nod. "Someone you don't want to remember?" Another nod, more emphatic this time. Eli studied the photograph more carefully. The background showed a modest living room, a couch, a coffee table, family photos on the wall. Normal things, safe things. But the way the photo had been torn suggested violence, desperation. "Little bird," he said carefully, "how long since you've seen your mother?" She held up fingers again, but this time the count was different. Higher. Too high for comfort. "You've been alone for a while." A nod. "And you came here looking for Uncle Samuel?" This time she looked genuinely surprised, as if she hadn't expected him to understand. "He was helping you?" A tentative nod. Eli sat back on his heels, pieces of a puzzle beginning to form a picture he didn't like. A child alone, carrying a torn photograph and hiding in an abandoned farmhouse. His uncle, who'd lived quietly on the edge of both worlds, helping someone who needed help. "Little bird, are you running away from someone?" The fear that flashed across her face was answer enough. Eli made a decision that surprised him with its certainty. He'd come here planning to clean out the house and sell it within the week. Now, looking at this frightened child who'd sewn a torn photograph into her quilt like a talisman, he found himself canceling those plans. "You know what? I think I'll stay here for a while," he said, keeping his voice casual. "This old house needs more work than I can do in a few days. Might take weeks, maybe longer." Little bird looked at him with something like hope. "Would that be okay with you if I stayed?" The nod she gave him was the most certain gesture he'd seen from her yet. That afternoon, while she napped curled up in the kitchen chair like a cat in the sun, Eli called his answering service and left a message. For his customers, family emergency, he said. Jobs would have to wait. It wasn't entirely a lie. Then he called his daughter Rebecca, something he hadn't done in months. Dad? Her voice carried surprise and concern. Is everything wrong? I'm not sure yet, he admitted. I'm at Uncle Samuel's place, dealing with his estate. It's more complicated than I expected. Do you need help? I could drive down tomorrow. No, he said quickly, then caught himself. Push people away. That had always been his first instinct. Not yet, but Rebecca? I might need to ask you some questions later, about what it was like when you were little. The pause that followed held 30 years of unspoken conversations. Dad, what's going on? He looked toward the kitchen, where a little bird slept, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. I'm not sure yet, he said again, but I think I might be getting a second chance at something I didn't do very well the first time. That evening, as they shared a simple meal of soup he'd heated on the old gas stove, Eli found himself studying the torn photograph again. Something about the careful way it had been hidden, sewn into the quilt's lining, spoke of preparation. This wasn't something grabbed in a moment of panic. This was something precious, protected, carried with intention. Tomorrow, he would start asking questions, carefully, quietly. Tonight, he would keep watch over a little bird who had flown too far from home and wasn't sure she wanted to be found. The inheritance he'd expected had become something else entirely. A responsibility, a puzzle, and perhaps a chance at redemption he'd never thought he deserved. The third morning brought the sound of hammering that echoed across the empty fields. Eli had risen early, driven by the kind of restless energy that came from having too many questions and not enough answers. If he was going to stay, and the decision felt less like a choice than a calling, the house needed to be livable. Little Bird watched from the kitchen window as he worked on the sagging front porch, her dark eyes tracking his every movement. She'd grown bolder overnight, venturing downstairs without being coaxed, even helping herself to breakfast from the supplies he brought from town. But she still moved like smoke through the rooms, ready to vanish at the first sign of threat. Porch rail had rotted through in 3 places, and the boards beneath creaked ominously under his weight. Eli found himself falling into the familiar rhythm of repair work measured twice, cut once, test every joint before trusting it with his full weight. It was honest work, the kind that left calluses on your hands and satisfaction in your chest. Careful. With that board, he muttered to himself as he pried up a particularly stubborn plank. Probably been here longer than you have. 47 years, came a small voice behind him. Eli nearly dropped his hammer. He turned slowly, not wanting to startle Little Bird back into silence. What did you say? She stood in the doorway, wrapped in her quilt despite the morning warmth. The porch. He said it was 47 years old. He built it himself. First words, real words, directed at him. Eli felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening after being locked for years. Uncle Samuel told you that? A nod. He said his hands weren't steady enough anymore to fix it right, but his heart wasn't ready to tear it down. Eli studied the porch with new eyes. Now he could see it, the careful joinery, the way the posts had been set deep and true, the subtle curve of the rail that followed the natural bend of the boards. This wasn't just construction. It was craftsmanship. He was a good builder, Eli said. He said you were better. Little Bird's voice was barely above a whisper. He said you got the gift, but not the patience. Eli's throat tightened. Samuel had talked about him. After all these years of distance and stubborn silence, Samuel had remembered him. He knew about me. He knew about everybody. Little Bird moved closer, close enough that he could see the careful way she placed each foot, testing the floorboards, before trusting them. He said the Stoltzfus men were all too proud for their own good, but the women who loved them were smart enough to wait them out. The words hit Eli like a physical blow. He thought of Rebecca, who called dutifully every few months but never visited. Of his ex-wife Martha, who'd finally stopped waiting for him to figure out how to be present in his own life. Of all the bridges he'd burned because he'd been too proud to admit he needed help crossing them. What else did he tell you? Little. Bird was quiet for so long that Eli thought she'd retreated back into silence. But then she spoke, her voice carrying the careful cadence of someone repeating words they'd memorized. He said sometimes the Lord puts people in our path, not because we're ready for them, but because they need us to learn to be ready. Eli set down his hammer and really looked at her. This small girl who spoke like an old soul and moved like a shadow. Little Bird, how long were you here with Uncle Samuel? Not long enough, she said simply. The sadness in those 3 words told Eli everything he needed to know about how Samuel had died, suddenly, without warning, leaving behind someone who'd been counting on him. Come here, he said gently. Want to help me with this? She approached cautiously, but when he handed her a smaller hammer and showed her how to tap the nails while he held the board steady, she took to it like she'd been born with tools in her hands. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, falling into the kind of rhythm that comes when 2 people are focused on the same task. It was while they were working that Little Bird's quilt slipped from her shoulders, and Eli got his first clear look at what she wore underneath. The pink sweater was more faded than he'd realized, and too small, but it was clean and carefully mended. Someone had taken time to darn the small holes at the elbows with thread that almost matched. The same someone who taught her to handle tools with respect and work with quiet focus. Little Bird, before you came here, who took care of you? Her hammer stopped mid-tap. Nobody, she said. I took care of me. That's a big job for someone your age. She shrugged. I'm good at it, Eli believed her. Everything about the way she moved, ate, worked spoke of hard-earned self-sufficiency. But it also spoke of a childhood spent learning lessons no child should have to master. After lunch, while Little Bird dozed in the kitchen chair she'd claimed as her own, Eli explored the barn behind the house. It was in better condition than the house itself. Samuel had kept his tools here, and tools demanded respect. The workshop took up the back corner of the barn, and it was here that Eli found them. Wooden toys, carved with the kind of attention to detail that transformed simple blocks of wood into something magical. Horses that seemed ready to gallop, dogs with alert ears and knowing eyes. A train set with cars that connected with precise wooden pins. They were unmistakably Amish work, simple, functional, beautiful in the way that things made with love always are. But they were also something more. Each piece showed signs of being handled, played with, loved. Little Bird's fingerprints, perhaps. Or maybe Samuel's, remembering his own childhood. When Eli carried a few pieces back to the house, Little Bird was awake and watching him through the window. Her eyes went wide when she saw what he carried. He made those for you? Eli asked Dot. She shook her head. He made them before. Long time ago, but he said... She stopped, looking uncertain. What did he say? He said they were waiting for the right child to play with them again. Eli set the wooden horse on the table between them. It was perfectly balanced, carved so that the slightest touch would set it rocking. Little Bird reached out tentatively, then pulled her hand back. It's okay, Eli said. Toys are meant to be played with. She touched the horse with one finger, setting it into gentle motion. A smile ghosted across her face, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Uncle Samuel used to tell me stories about when he was little, she said, her voice dreamy as she watched the horse rock. About how his father would carve animals for him and his brothers. He said every piece of wood had something inside it, waiting to be set free. Eli picked up another piece, a dog with a tilted head and one ear raised as if listening for something. What else did he tell you? He said his brother left the church because he wanted to build things that weren't allowed. Houses for English people. Fancy things. Little Bird looked at Eli directly. He said his brother forgot that the best things you can build are the ones that bring people together, not the ones that keep them apart. The words settled between them like dust motes in sunlight. Eli found himself thinking about all the houses he'd built over the years. Custom homes for people who'd wanted impressive kitchens and walk-in closets. Additions that added space, but somehow made families feel further apart. When had he forgotten that the purpose of shelter was to bring people home? That evening, as they shared another simple meal, Little Bird played quietly with the wooden animals while Eli repaired a loose leg on her chair. Outside, a car drove slowly past the house, its headlights sweeping across the kitchen windows. Little Bird went perfectly still, her hand frozen halfway to the wooden horse. "It's okay," Eli said quietly. "Just someone turning around." But she didn't relax until the sound of the engine faded completely, and he realized that their peaceful interlude was more fragile than he'd understood. Someone, somewhere, was looking for a little girl who'd learned to make herself invisible. The question was, how long before they thought to look here? The loose floorboard in the front room had been bothering Eli for days. Every time he walked across it, the board would give slightly, creating a hollow sound that spoke of problems beneath. On the fourth morning, with Little Bird safely occupied feeding the 3 chickens he'd bought from a farmer down the road, he decided to investigate. The board came up easier than expected, revealing a small cavity between the joists. Someone had used this space deliberately, not just as a hiding place, but as a repository. Wrapped in an old flour sack were dozens of drawings, carefully folded and preserved. Eli spread them across the kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. They were clearly Little Bird's work, the same careful attention to detail he'd seen in her journal, the same precise way she broke her food into manageable pieces. But these drawings told a different story than the hopeful sketches he'd found before. Dark figures loomed over smaller ones. Houses with all the windows black. Cars with headlights like angry eyes. And in the corner of nearly every drawing, the same small figure, a girl with long dark hair, always hiding, always running, always alone. The most disturbing drawing showed a man with his back turned, walking away from a house where 2 figures stood in the doorway, one tall, one small. The small figure had her arms outstretched toward the departing man, but he was already too far away to see. "You found them!" Eli turned to find Little Bird standing in the doorway, her face pale but resigned. "I was fixing the floor," he said gently. "I didn't mean to pry." She approached the table slowly, looking at the drawings as if seeing them for the first time. "I put them there when after." She stopped, swallowed hard. "Samuel said sometimes you have to put the bad things somewhere safe before you can start thinking about the good things." Eli studied the drawings again with new understanding. This wasn't just childhood art, it was therapy. Samuel had been helping her process whatever had happened before she arrived here. "This man who's walking away," Eli said, pointing to the figure in the most recent drawing. "Is this someone you knew?" Little Bird nodded, her finger tracing the outline of the departing figure. "My daddy. He said he'd come back, but..." She shrugged with the kind of acceptance that broke Eli's heart. "People say lots of things. And your mother? She got sick, really sick. Then the people came and said I had to go live somewhere else." Little Bird picked up another drawing, one that showed a house with bars on the windows. "They said it was just until Daddy came back, but he didn't." Eli thought about the torn photograph, about the careful way it had been preserved despite everything else being left behind. How long were you in that other place? Little bird held up fingers. 7. Then more fingers. Too many for comfort. And you left there to come here? I didn't leave. Her voice carried the precision of someone who'd learned that words mattered. I escaped. The weight of that distinction settled over Eli like a blanket. Escape implied danger, implied a situation where a child felt she had no choice but to run. Little bird, did someone hurt you in that place? She was quiet for so long that Eli thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Not me, but they hurt other kids. And I was next. The simple honesty of it hit Eli like a physical blow. He found himself gripping the edge of the table, trying to process the idea that this small girl had been living in a situation that required such desperate measures. How did you know to come here? I didn't. I just ran. Little bird picked up the drawing of the house with black windows. I was hiding in the woods, and it got really cold. I saw this place and thought maybe I could sleep in the barn for one night. But then I heard him singing. Samuel? He was in the garden, pulling weeds and singing this old song. In the language, the one you speak sometimes. Pennsylvania Dutch. Samuel had been singing in Pennsylvania Dutch. It sounded like home, Little bird continued. Like when Mama would sing to me when I was little, before she got sick. So I came closer, and he saw me. Eli could picture it his uncle, alone in his garden, probably missing the community he'd left behind, singing the old songs to keep the memories alive. And this frightened child, drawn by something familiar in an unfamiliar world. What did he do? He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Well, little bird, looks like you flew a long way to get here. You must be hungry." She smiled at the memory. He made me soup, real soup, not from a can. And he never asked questions I didn't want to answer. How long were you with him? 3 weeks. Almost 4. The smile faded. Then one morning he didn't wake up. I tried to wake him, but she stopped, wrapped her arms around herself. I stayed with him for a while. But then I got scared, so I hid in the attic. Eli's chest tightened as he imagined this child alone with Samuel's body, too young to understand death, but old enough to know she was in danger if anyone found her. "You did the right thing," he said. "Samuel would have wanted you to be safe." They spent the rest of the morning going through the drawings together. Little bird explained each one with the matter-of-fact tone of someone recounting a grocery list. The foster home, where older boys took the food meant for younger children. The social worker, who promised things would get better, but never came back. The night she slipped out through a bathroom window and started walking. "I wasn't trying to find this place," she said. "I was just trying to get away." But as Eli listened to her story, he began to understand that she hadn't found Samuel's house by accident. She'd been drawn here by something deeper than chance. The same something that had made Samuel leave the church but never abandon its core values of protection and care. That afternoon, while Little Bird napped in her chair, Eli called Rebecca again. "Dad, you sound different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Calmer, maybe? More present." The word surprised him. Present. He'd spent so many years moving through life like he was passing through, never quite landing anywhere. "Rebecca, when you were little 8, 9 years old, what did you need from me that you didn't get?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. "Dad, where is this coming from?" "Just indulge me. Please." Another pause. "Then, you were always working. Even when you were home, you were thinking about the next job, the next project. I used to make up stories about why you couldn't just sit with me and read a book or I. Don't know. Just be there. I was providing for you. I know. And I'm grateful. But Dad, I needed you to want to be with me, not just feel obligated to take care of me." After he hung up, Eli sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about the difference between obligation and love, between providing shelter and creating home. Little Bird stirred in her chair, murmured something in her sleep, and settled again. Outside, another car drove slowly past. This time, Eli paid attention. It was the third one today, and they all had that same careful speed of someone looking for something specific. He moved to the window and watched the car disappear around the bend. Tomorrow he would need to make some calls, ask some careful questions. But tonight, he would keep watch over a little bird who'd flown too far from home and wasn't ready to be found. The drawings lay scattered across the table, a roadmap of trauma and resilience, fear and hope. Tomorrow they would continue the slow work of healing. Tonight they would simply rest in the knowledge that they were both exactly where they needed to be. The box of papers had been sitting in Samuel's bedroom closet like a patient's secret. Eli had avoided it for a week, telling himself he was focused on more immediate concerns: the leaking roof, the temperamental water heater, the growing stack of groceries needed to feed a child who was finally eating with something approaching appetite. But when Little Bird had fallen asleep during their afternoon reading session, curled up on the couch with one of Samuel's old books about woodworking, Eli found himself drawn to that closet like metal to a magnet. The box contained the detritus of a life lived quietly but not without purpose. Tax records, utility bills, receipts for farm equipment that had long since rusted away. But beneath the mundane paperwork, Eli found something that made his hand shake. Letters. Dozens of them, written in a child's careful script that grew more sophisticated over the years, all addressed to Uncle Samuel, all signed Love, Rebecca. His daughter had been writing to Samuel for years. The earliest letter was dated 15 years ago, when Rebecca would have been 16. The paper was lined notebook paper, the kind used in high school, and her handwriting still carried the rounded curves of adolescence. Dear Uncle Samuel, I hope you don't mind that I'm writing to you. Dad gave me your address a long time ago, but said you probably wouldn't want to hear from us. But I figured if you didn't want to hear from me, you'd just throw the letters away. And if you did want to hear from me, you'd be happy to get them. I'm a junior now, and I've been thinking about college. Dad says I should study something practical. But I keep thinking about stories. Not just reading them, but maybe writing them someday. Is that stupid? Dad never really talks about dreams like that. I know you and Dad don't talk much, but I remember you from when I was little. You came to one of my birthday parties and brought me a wooden doll that you carved yourself. I still have it. Mom said you made it special just for me, and that you were the best carver in the family before you left. I guess I'm wondering if it's okay to want something that isn't practical. And if you think Dad would understand if I told him. Love. Rebecca. Eli's throat constricted as he read. He remembered that birthday party, Rebecca's 7th, maybe 8th. Samuel had driven down from Lancaster County in his battered pickup truck, stayed for exactly 2 hours, and left with barely a goodbye. But he brought that doll, and Rebecca had treasured it. Eli had never known about the letters. He read another, this one from 5 years later. Dear Uncle Samuel, I'm getting married next month. I know Dad told you, he said he'd let you know. Though I'm not sure he actually did. John is a good man. Patient, kind. The kind of person who asks how my day was and actually listens to the answer. I wish you could come to the wedding, but I understand why you probably can't. Dad and you, well, whatever happened between you two is old history, but it still seems to make everything complicated. I wanted you to know that I'm naming John's farm after something you once told me. In one of your letters, you said that home isn't a place you find, it's a place you build, one careful decision at a time. We're calling our place Careful Decisions Farm. I hope that makes you smile. I also wanted to thank you for all the letters over the years, for listening when Dad couldn't, for telling me stories about the family before everything got complicated. for helping me understand that wanting something different doesn't mean rejecting everything that came before. Love. Rebecca Ely set the letter down with trembling fingers. Rebecca had named her farm after something Samuel told her. His uncle had been a presence in his daughter's life in ways Eli had never imagined, filling gaps he hadn't even known existed. He read more letters, watching Rebecca grow up in careful cursive. College graduation, first job, marriage, the birth of her children, all shared with an uncle she saw rarely but trusted completely. And in every letter, between the lines of ordinary life updates, was the subtext of a daughter trying to understand a father who seemed determined to remain unknowable. Dear Uncle Samuel, Emma took her first steps yesterday. John tried to call Dad to tell him, but he was at work and said he'd call back later. He never did. I know he's busy, and I know he cares in his own way, but sometimes I wonder if he even wants to be part of our lives, or if he just feels like he should be Doc. Do you think he was different when he was younger, before Mom left? I have these memories of him reading to me when I was very small, but they feel almost like dreams. Like maybe I made them up because I wanted them to be true. Emma has his eyes, you know? The same serious gray that seems to see everything and give nothing away. I hope she gets his steady hands too, but I pray she gets John's easy heart. The letters painted a picture of a man Eli barely recognized himself, seeing through the eyes of a daughter who'd spent her whole life trying to decode his emotional distance. In her careful words, he saw his own failures reflected back. The phone calls not returned, the milestones missed, the way he'd let work become an excuse for avoiding the messier, more complicated business of being present. But he also saw Samuel's influence throughout Rebecca's life-gentle guidance. Patient, listening, the kind of steady support that Eli had never known how to provide. The most recent letter was dated just 6 months ago. Dear Uncle Samuel, the kids ask about their grandfather sometimes. Emma's 12 now, old enough to notice that other kids have grandparents who come to school plays and birthday parties. I never know what to tell her. I could drive down there and force the issue, I suppose. Show up at his shop and demand that he'd be part of our lives. But I learned from you that you can't make someone want to be close to you. You can only leave the door open and hope they choose to walk through it. I worry sometimes that I'm doing the same thing to my kids that Dad did to me, protecting them from disappointment by not building expectations. But maybe that's just another form of abandonment. Thank you for always being the door that stayed open. I hope you know how much that has meant. Love, Rebecca. Ely sat in the gathering dusk of Samuel's bedroom, surrounded by evidence of a relationship he'd never known existed. His brother had been the father figure Rebecca needed, stepping in quietly to fill the space Eli had left empty. You found them. Eli looked up to find Little Bird standing in the doorway, her hair mussed from sleep. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I heard paper rustling. She approached cautiously, as she still did when she sensed strong emotions. Are those letters? From my daughter, to Uncle Samuel. Little Bird climbed onto the bed beside him, folding her legs under her. He kept all of them, in a special box with her name on it. You knew about these? She nodded. He used to read parts of them to me sometimes. The happy parts. He said she sounded like someone who would understand about finding families in unexpected places. Eli thought about that phrase, finding families in unexpected places. Here he was, sitting in his uncle's house with a child who wasn't his, reading letters from a daughter who'd found the father she needed in an uncle who'd never had children of his own. Little Bird, what if I told you that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they love most? She considered this seriously. I'd say that's probably why forgiveness got invented. Her matter-of-fact wisdom made him smile despite the ache in his chest. Samuel taught you that? No, my mama did. Before she got sick. Little Bird picked up one of the letters, studying Rebecca's handwriting. Samuel said forgiveness is like a door. It works both ways. The person who forgives gets to stop carrying around all that hurt, and the person who gets forgiven gets a chance to do better. As darkness settled over the farmhouse, Eli made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. He picked up Samuel's old rotary phone and dialed a number he knew by heart but rarely used. Rebecca? It's Dad. Dad? Is everything okay? No, he said honestly. But I think maybe it could be. I found something today that made me realize I've been wrong about a lot of things. And I was wondering, would you be willing to come visit? There's someone I'd like you to meet. The pause that followed felt like 30 years of missed conversations, hanging in the balance. Of course, Dad. I'll drive down this weekend. After he hung up, Little Bird looked at him with those serious dark eyes. Are you scared? Terrified, he admitted. Good, she said, with the certainty of someone who'd learned the best things often came disguised as the scariest things. That means it matters. Outside, another car drove slowly past the house. But for the first time since finding Little Bird, Eli wasn't focused on the potential threat. He was thinking about doors and forgiveness, and the complicated mathematics of family that somehow always added up to more than the sum of its parts thought. It was the laundry that gave her away. Little Bird had been wearing the same clothes for over a week, and despite her careful attention to washing up each evening, Eli could see that she needed fresh things to wear. When he'd suggested a trip to town for new clothes, she'd agreed with an eagerness that told him how much she'd wanted clean garments, but hadn't known how to ask Dot at the small thrift store on Main Street. She'd chosen carefully 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a warm sweater for the cooling October weather. Practical choices, nothing flashy, everything selected with the eye of someone who'd learned to make things last. Dot. It was when they returned home and she changed into fresh clothes that the bracelet slipped from her pocket, landing on the kitchen floor with a soft metallic clink. Eli almost didn't notice it. He was busy putting away the few groceries they'd picked up, thinking about the visit from Rebecca scheduled for the weekend. But Little Bird's sharp intake of breath made him turn around. She was staring at the bracelet like it was a snake that might strike. What is it? Eli asked gently. Little Bird snatched up the bracelet and clutched it to her chest, but not before Eli caught a glimpse of red medical alert symbols and engraved text. Little Bird, is that yours? A reluctant nod. Can I see it? She held it for a long moment, conflict playing across her face. Finally, with the resigned air of someone who knew secrets had a way of revealing themselves, she handed it over. The bracelet was small, sized for a child's wrist, but the information engraved on it was comprehensive. Anna Marie Hoffman, it. Read. Age 8. Type 1 diabetes. Emergency contact, followed by a phone number with a local area code. Anna. Her real name was Anna. Eli looked at the date of birth engraved on the back and felt his heart sink. She wasn't 8, as he'd assumed. She was barely 7, small for her age and made to seem older by the weight of experiences no child should carry. Anna, he said softly, testing the name. She flinched as if he'd slapped her. Nobody calls me that anymore. That girl, she's gone. Honey, you can't just stop being who you are. Yes, you can. Her voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd done exactly that. Anna had a family. Anna had a mama who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and a daddy who promised to come back. Anna believed in promises. She wrapped her arms around herself. Little Bird doesn't believe in anything except staying hidden. Eli studied the bracelet, processing the implications. Type 1 diabetes meant medication, regular monitoring, medical care she hadn't been receiving. How had she been managing her condition while living rough? Anna, Little Bird, do you have insulin? She pulled a small bag from her pocket, the kind used for medical supplies. Inside were insulin pens, test strips, a glucose monitor that had seen better days. Samuel got them for me. He said his neighbor had diabetes too, so he knew what to ask for. Samuel. Of course, Samuel had taken care of this. Eli thought of his uncle, quietly managing a complex medical situation for a child who couldn't risk seeking official help. When did you last check your blood sugar? This morning. Before breakfast. And? It was fine. I'm good at taking care of myself. She was. Eli could see that in the organized way she kept her supplies, the careful routine she'd developed. But she was also 7 years old, managing a serious medical condition while living as a runaway. The weight of that responsibility made his chest ache. Little bird, Anna, we need to talk about this bracelet. The phone number. No. The word came out sharp, frightened. You can't call them. They'll send me back. Back where? To the place. The foster place where... She stopped, shook her head violently. I won't go back there. I'll run again first. Eli knelt beside her chair, making himself small and non-threatening. Tell me about the place. It wasn't supposed to be forever. Just until Daddy came back from wherever he went. But the lady Mrs. Chun, she had too many kids and not enough food, and the older boys. Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. They said I was too little to need my medicine. That I was faking being sick for attention. The casual cruelty of it made Eli's hands clench into fists. Children taking medication away from a diabetic child. Adults too overwhelmed or uncaring to notice. How long were you there? 6 months, maybe 7. It's hard to remember. Anna pulled her knees to her chest. I tried to tell the social worker. Lady, but she said the older kids were just teasing, and I needed to be tougher. So you left. I took my supplies and climbed out the bathroom window. I walked for 3 days before I found this place. Anna looked at him with those serious dark eyes. I wasn't trying to find Uncle Samuel. I was just trying to find somewhere safe. Eli thought about a 7-year-old child walking for 3 days, managing her medical condition while navigating a world that hadn't protected her when protection was its job. Anna, I need to make some phone calls. Not to send you back, he added, quickly when he saw panic flash across her face. But to understand what happened, to find out if there are better options. There aren't. Her voice carried the flat certainty of experience. There are just different kinds of bad places. That evening, after Anna had gone to sleep, Eli called the number on the bracelet. It rang twice before a tired voice answered. Chun residence. Mrs. Chun? My name is Eli Stoltzfus. I'm calling about Anna Hoffman. A sharp intake of breath. Did you find her? Is she okay? The genuine concern in the woman's voice surprised him. She's safe, but I need to understand what happened. Why she felt she had to run. A long pause. Then, Mr. Stoltzfus, I run a foster home. I do my best, but her voice cracked. Anna was one of 12 children in my care. I didn't know the older boys were hiding her insulin. When I found out, I was horrified, but by then, she was gone. I should have watched more carefully, should have known. Mrs. Chun's voice carried the weight of guilt. The state workers said she'd probably been picked up by someone, taken somewhere far away. We never thought she'd survive on her own. How long has she been missing? 4 months? Maybe 5. We stopped counting after the first month when the police said, she stopped. Mr. Stoltzfus, how do you know Anna? Are you family? Eli looked toward the stairs where Anna slept, probably, dreaming of wooden horses and pancakes on Sunday mornings. I'm working on that. After he hung up, Eli sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about systems that failed children, about the difference between providing care and providing safety, about the peculiar mathematics of love that could make a stranger feel more like family than blood relatives. Tomorrow Rebecca would arrive, and he would have to explain about Anna. about the choice he was making to keep her safe, even if it meant bending rules that had already failed her. Outside, a car drove past without slowing. For the first time in days, Eli didn't tense at the sound. Anna was safe here. Whatever it took, whatever complications arose, he would make sure she stayed that way. The little girl who called herself Little Bird because Anna had believed in promises that broke. She deserved a chance to learn that some promises could be kept, even if it meant everything else had to change. Rebecca arrived on Saturday morning in a sensible sedan that looked like it had been purchased with practicality rather than passion in mind. Eli watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the driveway for a long moment, gathering courage or composure. He couldn't tell which thought Anna pressed her face to the glass beside him. "She looks like you," she observed. "Same serious face." "Do I look serious?" "All the time. Except when you're working with wood. Then you look," Anna paused, searching for the word, "happy. Like you remember something good." Before Eli could respond to that unexpected insight, Rebecca was climbing the front steps. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to test each board before trusting it, a skill that served her well on Samuel's still unfinished porch. "Dad." She stood in the doorway, taking in the house that looked nothing like the ruin he'd described over the phone. Clean windows, patched walls, the smell of fresh coffee, and something that might have been hope. Rebecca. He wanted to hug her, but 30 years of distance had left him uncertain about such gestures. "Come in. There's someone I'd like you to meet." Anna had retreated to the kitchen table, but she watched everything with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. When Rebecca entered the room, Anna stood politely, the way children did when meeting adults who might matter. "This is Anna," Eli said. "Anna, this is my daughter Rebecca." "Hello, Anna." Rebecca's voice carried the gentle tone she probably used with her own children. "Dad told me you've been helping him fix up the house." Anna nodded solemnly. "He's teaching me about wood. Uncle Samuel left lots of tools, but Eli knows how to use them better." Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly at the easy familiarity in Anna's voice, but she said nothing. Instead, she accepted Eli's offer of coffee and settled at the kitchen table while Anna went outside to check on the chickens. "Dad, what's really going on here?" Eli had practiced this conversation in his head dozens of times, and now, facing his daughter's direct gaze, the words felt inadequate. "It's complicated. Most important things are." He told her everything, finding Anna in the attic, the torn photograph, the medical bracelet, the failed foster placement. He showed her Samuel's letters, the drawings hidden in the floorboards. The careful way Anna managed her diabetes with supplies Samuel had somehow procured. Rebecca listened without interruption, her expression shifting from confusion to concern to something deeper. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, you can't just keep her here indefinitely. There are legal issues, custody questions." "I know. And you're planning to what?" "Fight the system for custody of a child you've known for 2 weeks?" When she said it like that, it sounded impossible. But Eli thought about Anna's careful way of breaking her food into precise pieces, her quiet competence with tools that should have been too big for her hands, the way she'd stopped believing in promises because too many had been broken. "Yes," he said simply. Rebecca studied his face for a long moment. "This isn't just about her, is it? This is about us. About the father you think you should have been." The words hit him like a physical blow because they were true, but they weren't the whole truth. "Maybe it started that way," he admitted. "But Rebecca, she needs—" He stopped, trying to find words for something he felt more than understood. "She needs someone to choose her. Not because it's convenient or legally required, but because she matters. Because she deserves to feel safe. And you think you can provide that?" Before Eli could answer, Anna burst through the door with the kind of excited energy he rarely saw from her. "Eli, there's a box in the barn I never saw before." It was hidden behind the workbench, and when I moved the wood to make room for the new lumber, I found... She stopped, suddenly aware that she'd interrupted an adult conversation. "Sorry, I can wait. What kind of box?" Eli asked. "A metal one, like for important papers. It has your uncle's name on it." The three of them walked to the barn together, Anna leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd made this space her own. Behind Samuel's workbench, wedged between the wall and a stack of lumber, was indeed a metal document box. Inside, Eli found what appeared to be a second will, dated just 3 months before Samuel's death. This one was different from the simple document the lawyer had read, more detailed, more specific, and accompanied by a thick folder of research and correspondence. The will itself was straightforward enough. The property and all its contents were left to Eli, along with a letter of explanation. But it was the folder that made his hands shake. Samuel had been investigating Anna's case for months. There were copies of newspaper articles about her parents' arrest on drug charges, documentation of her placement in foster care, medical records that showed her diabetes had been poorly managed in the system. There were letters to social workers, requests for information, even correspondence with a family lawyer about the possibility of emergency custody. But most shocking was a series of journal entries in Samuel's careful handwriting, documenting Anna's arrival and his growing concern for her welfare. October 15th. The child appeared in my garden today. Thin, frightened, clearly running from something. She reminds me of Eli at that age, too serious, too careful, carrying burdens that belong to adults. I gave her soup and a warm place to sleep. October 18th. She's been here 4 days now. Won't tell me her name, but she responds to little bird. Diabetes, poorly controlled. Someone was supposed to be taking care of her and failed badly. October 22nd. Made contact with family lawyer about emergency guardianship procedures. Complex situation. She's technically a runaway from state custody, but the system failed her. First, October 30th. Eli would be better at this than I am. He has the patience for frightened things, the skill to build trust slowly. If something happens to me, I pray he'll find her and understand what needs doing. November 2nd. Lawyer says emergency custody is possible, but requires stable home. Character references, willingness to navigate bureaucracy. I'm too old for such battles. But Eli has always been strongest when he's protecting someone. November 5th. Prepared second will naming. Eli is primary heir with specific instructions regarding any children found on property. Lawyer thinks I'm being melodramatic, but I know this child needs more than I can give her. The final entry was dated just 2 days before Samuel's death. November 8th. Anna learned her real name from medical bracelet. Helped me repair chicken coop today. She has good hands, careful attention to detail. Reminds me of watching Eli learn woodworking. Same focus, same desire to do things right. If I don't survive this hard episode, I trust Eli will see what I see. This child is meant to be part of our family. Eli looked up to find Rebecca reading over his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. He knew, she whispered. He planned all of this. Anna stood beside them, her face pale. He wrote about me? He wrote about loving you, Eli said, about wanting you to be safe. The folder contained even more complete legal strategy for obtaining custody. Character references Samuel had already begun collecting. Even a letter addressed to Eli that the lawyer was instructed to deliver only if Anna was still on the property when Samuel died. Eli opened the letter with trembling fingers. Dear Eli, if you're reading this, then the Lord has called me home and left you with a choice I pray you're brave enough to make. This child found her way to me, but she was meant for you. I can see it in the way she watches you work, the way she trusts your steady hands and quiet voice. You have always been strongest when you had someone to protect, and she needs protection more than any child should. I've prepared what I can: legal documents, medical information, a path through the bureaucracy that might listen if we approach them right. But the choice to fight for her must be yours. The inheritance I'm leaving you isn't just this property. It's the chance to be the father you always had the capacity to be. Not just to Anna, but to Rebecca, who's been waiting 30 years for you to choose connection over safety. Build something beautiful. Eli, build a family. Your brother, Samuel. The barn fell silent, except for the sound of wind through the rafters and the distant clucking of chickens. Anna moved closer to Eli, not quite touching but close enough that he could feel her presence like a small, warm flame. What does it mean? She asked quietly. Eli looked at his daughter, then at this small girl who'd somehow become essential to his understanding of what home could mean. It means, he said, his voice rough with emotion, that Uncle Samuel knew exactly what he was doing when he brought us all together. Rebecca reached out and took Anna's hand. It means we're going to fight for you, all of us, together. For the first time since Ellie had known her, Anna smiled without reservation, a child's smile. Bright and hopeful and utterly trusting. Outside, another car drove slowly past the house, but this time, none of them paid attention. They were too busy planning a future that finally felt possible. Rebecca arrived on Saturday morning in a sensible sedan that looked like it had been purchased with practicality rather than passion in mind. Eli watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the driveway for a long moment, gathering courage or composure. He couldn't tell which. Anna pressed her face to the glass beside him. She looks like you, she observed. Same serious face. Do I look serious? All the time. Except when you're working with wood. Then you look, Anna paused, searching for the word. Happy. Like you remember something good. Before Eli could respond to that unexpected insight, Rebecca was climbing the front steps. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to test each board before trusting it, a skill that served her well on Samuel's still unfinished porch. Dad. She stood in the doorway, taking in the house that looked nothing like the ruin he'd described over the phone. Clean windows, patched walls, the smell of fresh coffee, and something that might have been hope. Rebecca. He wanted to hug her, but 30 years of distance had left him uncertain about such gestures. Come in. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Anna had retreated to the kitchen table, but she watched everything with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. When Rebecca entered the room, Anna stood politely, the way children did when meeting adults who might matter. This is Anna, Eli said. Anna, this is my daughter Rebecca. Hello, Anna. Rebecca's voice carried the gentle tone she probably used with her own children. Dad told me you've been helping him fix up the house. Anna nodded solemnly. He's teaching me about wood. Uncle Samuel left lots of tools, but Eli knows how to use them better. Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly at the easy familiarity in Anna's voice, but she said nothing. Instead, she accepted Eli's offer of coffee and settled at the kitchen table while Anna went outside to check on the chickens. Dad, what's really going on here? Eli had practiced this conversation in his head dozens of times, but now, facing his daughter's direct gaze, the words felt inadequate. It's complicated. Most important things are. He told her everything, finding Anna in the attic. The torn photograph, the medical bracelet, the failed foster placement. He showed her Samuel's letters, the drawings hidden in the floorboards, the careful way Anna managed her diabetes with supplies Samuel had somehow procured. Rebecca listened without interruption, her expression shifting from confusion to concern to something deeper. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Dad, you can't just keep her here indefinitely. There are legal issues, custody questions. I know. And you're planning to what? Fight the system for custody of a child you've known. For 2 weeks? When she said it like that, it sounded impossible. But Eli thought about Anna's careful way of breaking her food into precise pieces, her quiet competence with tools that should have been too big for her hands, the way she'd stopped believing in promises because too many had been broken. Yes, he said simply. Rebecca studied his face for a long moment. This isn't just about her, is it? This is about us. About the father you think you should have been. The words hit him like a physical blow because they were true. But they weren't the whole truth. Maybe it started that way, he admitted. But Rebecca, she needs. He stopped, trying to find words for something he felt more than understood. She needs someone to choose her. Not because it's convenient or legally required, but because she matters. Because she deserves to feel safe. And you think you can provide that? Before Eli could answer, Anna burst through the door with the kind of excited energy he rarely saw from her. Eli, there's a box in the barn I never saw before. It was hidden behind the workbench, and when I moved the wood to make room for the new lumber I found, she stopped, suddenly aware that she'd interrupted an adult conversation. Sorry, I can wait. What kind of box? Eli asked. A metal one, like for important papers. It has your uncle's name on it. The three of them walked to the barn together, Anna leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd made this space her own. Behind Samuel's workbench, wedged between the wall and a stack of lumber, was indeed a metal document box inside. Eli found what appeared to be a second will, dated just 3 months before Samuel's death. This one was different from the simple document the lawyer had read, more detailed, more specific, and accompanied by a thick folder of research and correspondence. The will itself was straightforward enough. The property and all its contents were left to Eli, along with a letter of explanation. But it was the folder that made his hands shake. Samuel had been investigating Anna's case for months. There were copies of newspaper articles about her parents' arrest on drug charges, documentation of her placement in foster care, medical records that showed her diabetes had been poorly managed in the system. There were letters to social workers, requests for information, even correspondence with a family lawyer about the possibility of emergency custody. But most shocking was a series of journal entries in Samuel's careful handwriting, documenting Anna's arrival and his growing concern for her welfare. October 15th. The child appeared in my garden today. Thin, frightened, clearly running from something. She reminds me of Eli at that age. Too serious, too careful, carrying burdens that belong to adults. I gave her soup and a warm place to sleep. October 18th. She's been here 4 days now. Won't tell me her name. But she responds to Little Bird. Diabetes, poorly controlled. Someone was supposed to be taking care of her and failed badly. October 22nd. Made contact with family lawyer about emergency guardianship procedures. Complex situation. She's technically a runaway from state custody. But the system failed her. First, October 30th. Eli would be better at this than I am. He has the patience for frightened things, the skill to build trust slowly. If something happens to me, I pray he'll find her and understand what needs doing. November 2nd. Lawyer says emergency custody is possible, but requires stable home, character references, willingness to navigate bureaucracy. I'm too old for such battles, but Eli has always been strongest when he's protecting someone. November 5th. Prepared second will naming. Eli as primary heir with specific instructions regarding any children found on property. Lawyer thinks I'm being melodramatic, but I know this child needs more than I can give her. The final entry was dated just 2 days before Samuel's death. November 8th. Anna learned her real name from medical bracelet, helped me repair chicken coop. Today, she has good hands, careful attention to detail. Reminds me of watching Eli learn woodworking, same focus, same desire to do things right. If I don't survive this hard episode, I trust Eli will see what I see. This child is meant to be part of our family. Eli looked up to find Rebecca reading over his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. He knew, she whispered. He planned all of this. Anna stood beside them, her face pale. He wrote about me? He wrote about loving you, Eli said, about wanting you to be safe. The folder contained even more a complete legal strategy for obtaining custody. Character references Samuel had already begun collecting. Even a letter addressed to Eli, but the lawyer was instructed to deliver only if Anna was still on the property when Samuel died. Eli opened the letter with trembling fingers. Dear Eli, if you're reading this, then the Lord has called me home and left you with a choice I pray you're brave enough to make. This child found her way to me, but she was meant for you. I can see it in the way she watches you work, the way she trusts your steady hands and quiet voice. You have always been strongest when you had someone to protect, and she needs protection more than any child should. I've prepared what I can: legal documents, medical information, a path through the bureaucracy that might listen if we approach them right. But the choice to fight for her must be yours. The inheritance I'm leaving you isn't just this property. It's the chance to be the father you always had the capacity to be. Not just to Anna, but to Rebecca, who has been waiting 30 years for you to choose connection over safety. Build something beautiful, Eli. Build a family. Your brother, Samuel. The barn fell silent, except for the sound of wind through the rafters and the distant clucking of chickens. Anna moved closer to Eli, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence like a small, warm flame. What does it mean? She asked quietly. Eli looked at his daughter, then at this small girl who'd somehow become essential to his understanding of what home could mean. It means, he said, his voice rough with emotion, that Uncle Samuel knew exactly what he was doing when he brought us all together. Rebecca reached out and took Anna's hand. It means we're going to fight for you, all of us, together. For the first time since Eli had known her, Anna smiled without reservation, a child's smile, bright and hopeful and utterly trusting. Outside, another car drove slowly past the house. But this time, none of them paid attention. They were too busy planning a future that finally felt possible. The law office of Morrison and Associates occupied the second floor of a brick building that had probably been elegant in 1952, but now felt tired around the edges. Eli sat in the waiting room with Rebecca, both of them pretending to read magazines, while Anna colored in a book Rebecca had brought from home. It had been 3 days since they'd found Samuel's hidden will, and those days had passed in a blur of phone calls, document gathering, and careful conversations about what came next. Anna had listened to their planning with the serious attention of someone whose future hung in the balance, asking questions that showed she understood more about legal proceedings than any 7-year-old should. Mr. Stoltzfus, a woman in her 50s, appeared in the doorway, dressed in the kind of practical suit that suggested competence without flash. I'm Margaret Morrison. Please, come in. Samuel's lawyer was nothing like what Eli had expected. Where he'd imagined someone formal and intimidating, Margaret Morrison had kind eyes and the sort of calm presence that probably served her. While, when dealing with families in crisis, her office was cluttered in the way that suggested real work. Rather than showcase files stacked on every surface, a coffee cup that had clearly been refilled multiple times, family photos mixed in with law books on the shelves. I have to admit, she said once they were seated, when Samuel first came to me about this situation, I thought he was being overly dramatic. Emergency custody documents for a hypothetical child seemed like an old man's paranoia. She gestured to the thick file on her desk. I've never been happier to be wrong. What exactly did Samuel prepare? Rebecca asked. Margaret opened the file, revealing documents that had been organized with military precision. Everything. Medical guardianship papers, emergency custody petitions, even preliminary adoption paperwork. Your uncle was nothing if not thorough. And this will actually work? Eli asked. The weight of Anna's trust in him felt heavier than any building he'd ever constructed. It should. The keys that Samuel documented Anna's original placement failure and his attempts to work within the system. When the system fails a child this badly, Margaret pulled out a thick folder of medical records. Anna's diabetes was completely unmanaged for months. She could have died from diabetic ketoacidosis if she hadn't been resourceful enough to manage her own condition. Anna looked up from her coloring book. What's ketoacidosis something? It's what happens when your blood sugar gets too high for too long, Margaret explained gently. It's very dangerous. The fact that you took care of yourself shows remarkable maturity. Uncle Samuel helped. He made sure I had the right medicine. Margaret nodded. Which is exactly the kind of evidence that will help our case. Samuel documented every medical intervention, every meal, every sign that you were being properly cared for here versus your previous placement. She pulled out another set of documents. The challenge is that Anna is technically considered a runaway from state custody. Under normal circumstances, she'd be returned to the system immediately. But Samuel built a case for emergency removal based on medical neglect. What do we need to do? Eli asked. First, we file for emergency temporary custody based on Samuel's documentation. I've scheduled a hearing for next Wednesday. Margaret looked directly at Anna. Sweetie, that means you'll have to talk to a judge. Tell them about what happened before you came to live with Uncle Samuel and about how you feel now. Anna's face went pale, but she nodded solemnly. Will they send me back to Mrs. Chun's house? Not if I can help it, Margaret said firmly. But, Anna, you need to understand this is going to be scary. There will be a lot of adults asking you questions, and some of them might not understand why you ran away. I didn't run away, Anna said with quiet precision. I escaped. The distinction, delivered in her matter-of-fact voice, seemed to hit Margaret like a physical blow. She glanced at Eli, then back at Anna. You're right. That's exactly what you did. And we're going to make sure the judge understands the difference. The next few days blurred together in a tornado of preparation. Eli found himself navigating bureaucracy with the same methodical approach he used for complex construction projects, breaking overwhelming tasks into manageable steps. Checking and double-checking every detail. Character references were the first requirement. Margaret needed people who could vouch for Eli's stability, his character, his ability to provide a safe home for a child with special medical needs. The first call was the hardest. Bishop Yoder, this is Eli Stoltzfus, Samuel's nephew. A pause. Then, Eli, I heard about Samuel's passing. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Thank you. Bishop, I know I left the church many years ago, but I'm hoping, that is, I need. Eli stopped, unsure how to ask for help from a community he'd abandoned. What do you need, Eli? The kindness in the older man's voice made his throat tight. I'm trying to adopt a child. A little girl who needs protection. The lawyers need character references, and I'll write the letter today, Bishop Yoder said without hesitation. Samuel spoke of you often over the years. He said you had a good heart, even if it took you a long time to trust it. One by one, other pieces fell into place. His former foreman from the construction company wrote a letter praising Eli's reliability and patience. The doctor who'd been treating Anna's diabetes provided detailed documentation of her improved health under Eli's care. Even Mrs. Chun, guilt-stricken about the failures in her foster home, agreed to testify about the inadequate care Anna had received. But it was Rebecca who surprised him most. I want to be a character witness, she announced over dinner on Monday night. Rebecca, you don't have to, Dad. Yes, I do. She set down her fork and looked at him directly. I've spent 30 years angry at you for not being the father I needed. But watching you with Anna, she glanced at the little girl who was carefully organizing her green beans into perfectly straight rows. I see the father you could have been, the one you still can be. Anna looked up at that. Your daddy wasn't good at being a daddy before? Rebecca smiled, but it was tinged with old sadness. He was good at taking care of me, making sure I had food and clothes and a safe place to live. But he wasn't good at being happy that I was there. Oh, Anna considered this seriously. Maybe he just needed practice. Maybe he did. That night, after Anna had gone to bed, Rebecca helped Eli organize the documents they'd need for court. Birth certificates, medical records, financial statements, the paperwork trail that would convince a judge that a 62-year-old single man could provide a stable home for a traumatized child. Are you scared? Rebecca asked as they stuffed papers into manila folders. Terrified, Eli admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good enough? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, sorting through bank statements. Dad, do you know what I remember most about being little? What? The way you test every board before you put your weight on it. The way you measure twice and cut once. The way you never rushed anything important. She looked up at him. You're not going to mess this up because you don't know how to do things carelessly. On Tuesday morning, the day before the hearing, a social worker arrived for a home inspection. Linda Rodriguez was younger than Eli had expected, with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too many cases like Anna's. She walked through the house methodically, checking smoke detectors, inspecting the locks on windows, verifying that medications were stored safely. Anna followed her around like a small shadow, answering questions with the careful politeness of a child who'd learned that adults held all the power. Anna, can you show me your room? Linda asked. Anna led her upstairs to the small bedroom Eli had converted from Samuel's office. It wasn't fancy, a simple bed, a desk where Anna did her reading practice, shelves for the few possessions she'd accumulated. But it was clean and warm and clearly belonged to someone who felt safe there. Do you like living here? Linda asked. Yes, ma'am. What do you like about it? Anna thought for a moment. Nobody hides my medicine. Nobody takes my food. And Eli. She paused, as if trying to find words for something important. Eli asks me what I think about things. Like my opinion matters. Linda made a note on her clipboard. What kinds of things? Like what color to paint the kitchen, and whether the chickens need a bigger coop. And if I think it would be okay to plant a garden next spring. Anna's voice grew stronger as she talked. He says this is my home too, so I should help decide how it looks. After Linda left, Eli found Anna sitting on the front porch, watching the chickens peck around the yard. How do you think that went? He asked, settling beside her on the steps. She seemed nice, but nice doesn't always mean they'll let you stay. The wisdom in that statement, the hard-earned knowledge that good intentions didn't always translate to good outcomes, made Eli's chest ache. Anna, no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. She looked at him with those serious dark eyes. You're not alone anymore. Even if the judge says you can't stay here, Rebecca and we're not going to stop fighting for you. We're not going to give up. Anna was quiet for a long moment. Then, Uncle Samuel said that families aren't always the people you're born to. Sometimes they're the people who choose you. He was right. Are you choosing me? The question hung in the air between them, simple and enormous. Yes, Eli said. I'm choosing you. We're choosing you. Anna nodded once, a gesture that somehow managed to contain both acceptance and hope. Tomorrow would bring the hearing. The lawyers, the judge who would decide their future. Tonight, they would simply be what they'd become over these weeks of careful trust-building. A family, imperfect and unconventional, but real in all the ways that mattered. The legal custody document in Samuel's file represented more than paperwork. It represented a promise that some people kept their word, that some adults could be trusted to put a child's needs first. Tomorrow, they would find out if the system could recognize what they'd already known, that home wasn't about blood or legal documents, but about choosing to show up for each other one careful day at a time. The family courthouse looked like every government building Eli had ever seen. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the kind of institutional efficiency that made people feel small. Anna sat between him and Rebecca in the hallway outside Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom, her feet barely touching the floor, holding a manila envelope that contained her most precious possession. "What's in there?" Rebecca asked gently, nodding. Toward the envelope. "My baptism certificate," Anna said. "From when I was baptized as a baby. Mama saved it from our old house before everything got bad." Eli's chest tightened. Samuel's baptism certificate had been crucial for establishing his Amish heritage and community ties. Now Anna was preparing to present her own proof of belonging, a connection to something larger than herself. Margaret Morrison appeared beside them, professional in her dark suit, but carrying the kind of energy that suggested controlled tension. "The judge is ready for us." "Anna, remember what we talked about? Answer the questions honestly. And if you need a break, just ask." Judge Hendricks was a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back severely and eyes that had probably seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. She looked up as they entered, her expression neutral but not unkind. "This is an emergency. Petition for temporary custody," she began, consulting her papers. "Mr. Stoltzfus, you're seeking custody of Anna Marie Hoffman, currently a ward of the state who left her placement approximately 5 months ago." "Yes, Your Honor." "And Ms. Morrison, you're arguing that this child should not be returned to state custody based on medical neglect in her previous placement." "That's correct, Your Honor. Anna's type 1 diabetes was severely mismanaged in foster care, putting her life at risk. Mr. Stoltzfus has provided appropriate medical care and a stable home environment." Judge Hendricks turned her attention to Anna. "Hello, Anna. I know this is scary, but I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Anna nodded, clutching her envelope. "Can you tell me about your medicine, your diabetes medicine?" "I take insulin," Anna said clearly, 4 times a day, and sometimes more if my blood sugar is too high. I check it with a little machine that pricks my finger." "And when you lived with Mrs. Chun, were you able to take your medicine?" Anna's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. "Sometimes. The older boys said I was faking being sick, so they would hide my insulin. Mrs. Chun tried to help, but she had 12 kids and couldn't watch all of us all the time." "What happened when you couldn't take your medicine?" "I got really sick, dizzy and thirsty, and sometimes I threw up. One time I almost fainted at school, but the nurse gave me juice and called Mrs. Chun." Judge Hendricks made a note. "And how do you feel now, living with Mr. Stoltzfus?" "Safe," Anna said immediately. "My medicine is in the kitchen where I can always get it, and Eli helps me remember to check my blood sugar. He even learned how to give me shots in case I can't do it myself." "Do you like living there?" "Yes, ma'am. It feels like home." The judge turned to the state's representative, a tired-looking woman in her 40s. "Ms. Patterson, what is the state's position on this matter?" "Your Honor, while we acknowledge that Anna's previous placement was inadequate, the proper procedure would be to return her to state custody and place her in a more suitable foster home. Mr. Stoltzfus, while well-intentioned, is unmarried, 62 years old, and has no formal training in caring for children with special medical needs." Margaret stood. "Your Honor, if I may present our first witness?" The next hour blurred together in a parade of testimony. Dr. Sarah Kim testified about Anna's dramatically improved health under Eli's care, producing charts that showed her blood, Sugar levels had stabilized completely since leaving foster care. Linda Rodriguez, the social worker who conducted the home inspection, spoke about the safe, nurturing environment she'd observed. But it was Bishop Yoder's testimony that seemed to catch the judge's attention. "Mr. Yoder, you've known Mr. Stoltzfus for how long?" "I baptized him when he was 16, the elderly bishop said, his voice carrying the authority of decades of community leadership. "That was 46 years ago. When he left our community, it broke his father's heart, but I always believed he would find his way back to his true nature." And what is his true nature? Protection. Care for those who cannot care for themselves. In our community, we call it being a shepherd, someone who watches over the vulnerable ones. Bishop Yoder looked directly at Anna. This child needs a shepherd. Eli Stoltzfus was born to be one. When Rebecca took the stand, her voice was clear and strong. "Your Honor, I won't lie to you about my father's past. He wasn't emotionally available when I was growing up. He was present, but not engaged." But watching him with Anna, she paused, gathering her thoughts. "I see the father he always had the capacity to be. More importantly, I see a man who has learned that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling you have." Do you believe your father can provide adequate care for Anna? I believe he already has. Anna isn't just safer with him, she's flourishing. She's learned to trust again, to believe that adults can keep their promises. That's not something you can measure with paperwork, but it's everything that matters. The morning session ended with Anna still scheduled to testify after lunch. As they left the courtroom, Eli saw her carefully placing her baptism certificate back in its envelope. "You did great in there," he told her. "I told the truth," she said simply. "Uncle Samuel said that's all you can ever do, tell the truth and trust that it's enough." Looking at this small girl who'd already faced more challenges than most adults, Eli found himself hoping that truth would indeed be enough. The afternoon would bring the most crucial testimony, Anna's own words about where she belonged and why. Everything they'd built together, all the careful trust and growing love, would come down to whether a 7-year-old could convince a judge that home wasn't about perfect circumstances, but about people who chose to show up for each other. Outside the courthouse, Eli's hand shook slightly as he held Anna's small fingers. Whatever happened next, she would know that someone had fought for her, that someone had seen her worth and refused to give up. That had to count for something. The afternoon session began with Anna in the witness chair, her legs dangling and her hands folded carefully in her lap. Judge Hendricks had moved from behind the bench to sit closer, creating a less intimidating atmosphere, but Anna's face remained pale with concentration. "Anna, I know this is hard," the judge said gently, "but I need to understand how you feel about where you're living now and what you think would be best for you." Anna reached into her envelope and pulled out her baptism certificate, a small, formal document with elegant script and a raised seal. She held it like a talisman. "This is from when I was a baby," she said, "before everything got bad. Mama kept. It's safe even when we had to move a lot, because she said it proved I belonged somewhere. What do you think it proves now?" Anna looked directly at the judge with those serious dark eyes. "That families aren't just about being born to people. Sometimes God puts you where you need to be, even if it's not where you started." Judge Hendricks leaned forward slightly. "Can you tell me about living with Mrs. Chun?" Mrs. Chun was nice, but she was tired all the time. There were too many kids and not enough of everything: food, attention, safety. Anna's voice remained steady, but Eli could see her gripping the certificate tighter. "The older boys said I was lying about being sick because they wanted my dessert portions. When I couldn't eat because my blood sugar was wrong, they said I was being dramatic. What happened when you got sick? One time I passed out in the bathroom. Another kid found me and got Mrs. Chun, but the boys said I was faking. After that, they started hiding my insulin to prove I didn't really need it. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter seemed to have stopped breathing. How did that make you feel? Anna considered the question with the seriousness of someone much older, invisible. Like I didn't matter enough for anyone to really see me. She looked at Eli. But Eli sees me. He notices when I'm worried or when my blood sugar feels wrong. He remembers that I like my food in separate groups and that loud noises make me scared. Ms. Patterson, the state's attorney, stood for cross-examination. Anna, Mr. Stoltzfus is quite a bit older than most parents. Don't you think you might be happier with a younger family? Maybe one with other children? Anna shook her head immediately. I don't want other children. I want Eli and Rebecca. She looked toward Rebecca in the gallery. Rebecca says I can call her whenever I want to talk about girl things that Eli doesn't understand. But what about when Mr. Stoltzfus gets older? What if he gets sick? Then I'll take care of him. Anna's voice carried absolute certainty. That's what families do. They take care of each other. Anna, you're only 7 years old. I'm 7 3/4, Anna corrected with quiet dignity. And I've been taking care of myself since I was 5. I know how to cook simple things and do laundry and manage my medicine. But with Eli, I don't have to do everything alone anymore. Judge Hendricks intervened. Anna, what would you say to me if I told you that you had to go back to living with a foster family? The question hung in the air like a held breath. Anna's face went very still, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. I would say that you don't understand what it's like to be a child that nobody chose. Mrs. Chun took me because it was her job. Other foster families might take me because the state pays them to. Anna looked directly at the judge, but Eli chose me because he wanted me to be safe. That's different. How is it different? When someone chooses you, they don't give up when things get hard. They don't send you away when you have nightmares or when your blood sugar makes you cranky. They stay because they want to, not because they have to. Anna held up her baptism certificate again. This says I was blessed when I was a baby. Uncle Samuel said that meant God had plans for me, but sometimes those plans don't look like what people expect. She glanced at Eli. I think maybe God's plan was for me to find someone who would choose me back. The silence that followed was profound. Judge Hendricks looked at Anna for a long moment, then at the assembled adults, then back at the small girl whose feet still didn't touch the floor. Anna, do you have anything else you'd like to tell me? Anna nodded solemnly. I drew you a picture. She reached into her envelope one more time and pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. When she unfolded it, the courtroom could see a drawing, unlike the dark, fearful sketches from her previous life. This one showed a house with bright yellow windows, smoke curling cheerfully from the chimney. In front of the house stood 3 figures, a tall man with a beard, a woman with kind eyes, and a small girl with dark hair. They were all holding hands, and above them, in careful 7-year-old script, were the words, My Family. I made this for you so you could see what home looks like, Anna said simply. In case that helps you decide. Judge Hendricks accepted. A drawing with gentle hands, studying it for a long moment. When she looked up, her professional composure had softened slightly. Thank you, Anna. You can go sit with Mr. Stoltzfus now. As Anna climbed down from the witness chair, Eli felt something shift in the room, a recognition that they had all witnessed something profound. A child had found her voice and used it to speak not just her truth, but a deeper truth about what family meant. The drawing she'd given the judge wasn't just art. It was testimony to the possibility of healing, the power of choice, and the radical act of hope that said some promises could be kept. Now they could only wait to see if hope would be enough. 6 months later, the farmhouse looked like a different place entirely. Fresh paint brightened the clapboard siding. The porch no longer sagged, and Samuel's old garden had been restored to productive life. But the most significant change wasn't visible from the road. It was the sound of laughter that drifted from the kitchen windows on Sunday mornings. Anna stood on a step stool beside the stove, carefully flipping pancakes while Eli monitored her technique. She'd grown 3 inches since the custody hearing, and her face had lost the pinched, wary look that had defined her for so long. Now she moved through the house with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. 2 more minutes on that one, Eli advised, watching the batter bubble. See how the edges are starting to set? I see it. Anna's voice carried the satisfaction of mastering a skill. Rebecca's going to love these. I added vanilla like she taught me. The custody hearing had lasted 3 days, but Judge Hendrick's decision had been swift and decisive. Temporary custody granted to Eli Stoltzfus with a 6-month review period to assess the placement's success. The state had the right to appeal, but Ms. Patterson had quietly indicated that given Anna's obvious well-being, they wouldn't pursue further action. Rebecca arrived just as they were setting the table, carrying the photographer and the bag full of what she called Sunday supplies, crossword puzzles, coloring books, and the ingredients for the elaborate hot chocolate Anna had discovered in one of Samuel's old cookbooks. Something smells amazing, Rebecca said, hugging first Anna, then Eli. The easy affection between them still surprised him sometimes. 30 years of careful distance, dissolved by a shared commitment to this small girl who'd needed them both. Anna made them herself, Eli said proudly. I just supervised. The photographer, a patient woman named Sarah, who specialized in family portraits, set up her equipment while they ate breakfast. She'd been recommended by Margaret Morrison, who'd said that some legal documents deserved to be celebrated with something more permanent than court papers. The light is perfect in here, Sarah observed, adjusting her camera settings. This kitchen has such warmth. It did. Over the months, they'd made small changes that transformed the space from Samuel's bachelor quarters into something that accommodated the family. Anna's diabetes supplies had their own organized drawer, marked with cheerful labels she'd made herself. The refrigerator displayed her artwork alongside Rebecca's children's school photos. Eli's woodworking magazines shared shelf space with Anna's library books and Rebecca's gardening catalogs. Can we take some pictures outside too? Anna asked. I want to show the chicken coop that Eli and I built. The chicken coop had been Anna's idea, a way to honor Samuel's memory while creating something practical. They designed it together, Anna sketching her ideas while Eli figured out the engineering. The finished structure was both functional and beautiful, with decorative cutouts that cast interesting shadows and a small weather vane shaped like a rooster. As they moved outside for photos, Eli noticed the car that had become a regular sight, Mrs. Chun's old sedan, driving slowly past the house. But where once such attention would have sent Anna into hiding, now she simply waved. Mrs. Chun had become an unexpected ally, visiting occasionally to check on Anna's progress and offering testimony when needed about the difference between Anna's previous state and her current thriving condition. Eli, can you put your hand on Anna's shoulder? Sarah directed, positioning them in front of the restored garden. And Rebecca, if you could step a little closer, perfect. As the camera clicked, Eli found himself thinking about the photograph. That had started everything, the torn picture Anna had sewn into her quilt, showing half a family that once was. Now they were creating a new image, one that documented not what had been lost, but what had been found. The final photo session took place in Samuel's old workshop, where Anna had set up a small carving station of her own. Her projects were simple rough animals and geometric shapes, but they showed the same patient attention to detail that characterized everything she did. Uncle Samuel would have liked this, Anna said, running her fingers over a small wooden bird she'd been working on. He always said that working with wood teaches you about time, how some things can't be rushed, and how the best things come from paying attention to small details. Eli thought about that wisdom as he watched her work. Anna had indeed taught him about time, how healing happened in small increments, how trust was built through consistent daily choices, how love grew not from grand gestures, but from the accumulation of ordinary moments. The review hearing had been a formality. Anna's medical records showed perfect management of her diabetes. Her academic progress exceeded all expectations. She'd not only caught up to grade level, but surpassed it in several subjects. Most importantly, her psychological evaluation showed a child who felt secure, valued, and genuinely happy. Judge Hendricks had made the adoption official with a smile. "In all my years on the bench," she'd said, "I've rarely seen such a clear case of a child and family who were meant to find each other." Now, as Sarah packed up her equipment, she handed Eli a small digital screen showing some of the morning's shots. The images revealed something that felt like magic. 3 people who looked like they'd always belonged together. "These will be ready next week," Sarah said. "But I have to tell you, in 20 years of taking family portraits, I've never seen such genuine happiness. Whatever you're all doing, keep doing it." That evening, after Rebecca had driven home and Anna was absorbed in a new book, Eli sat on the front porch and thought about inheritances. Samuel had left him much more than property. He'd left him a mission, a purpose, and ultimately, a family. Inside, Anna was practicing piano on the old upright Samuel had somehow kept in tune. The melody drifted through the windows, mixing with the sound of evening birds and the distant lowing of cattle from the neighbor's farm. Tomorrow would bring Monday routines, Anna's school day, Eli's work in the shop he'd set up in half of Samuel's barn. The ordinary rhythms of a life lived deliberately and well. But tonight he simply sat and listened to his daughter practice piano, marveling at how the word daughter had come to feel as natural as breathing. The final artifact of their journey together wouldn't be paper or metal or wood. It would be the family portrait that proved some inheritances were gifts that kept giving, transforming not just the receiver, but everyone they touched. Anna's music filled the evening air, and Eli Stoltzfus smiled, finally understanding what Samuel had meant about building something beautiful. They had built a family, one careful choice at a time, and it was the finest work any of them had ever done.